Hi, this is Travel Tales with Judith. I share stories and experiences from a lifetime of traveling. This is episode 4. Have you ever traveled with anybody who's a little bit unsure about handling things themselves on a trip? I had a good friend, Carol, who I traveled with many times, but she was always a little worried about the fact that if something happened to me, she wasn't sure she'd be able to manage whatever situation it was. So we had just traveled from Cusco in Peru down to La Paz in Bolivia, and I had come down with some kind of a cold. And La Paz is really high altitude. It's a city in levels, but the top level is at something like 13,000 feet. And after a couple of days in La Paz, I was getting worse and worse, and we thought we should get to a lower altitude where maybe there'd be more oxygen in the air for me to breathe. So we flew to Cochabamba. And in Cochabamba, um, we were staying at a hotel, and we woke up. I think it was our first morning there, and I was so weak I could barely make it to the bathroom and back to bed. And I just lay there, and I said, "Carol," I said, "I think I have to see a doctor." But I remembered that in a guidebook, because we used guidebooks back there, I still do actually. There was a doctor who had treated a lot of Peace Corps volunteers. So I said to Carol, "You can manage the call because I'm sure he speaks English." So she calls the doctor, and he didn't speak English. So she passes the phone to me. I was a Spanish teacher. Passes the phone to me, and I can barely get the words out. And I said, "I'm really sick, and I'm in a hotel." And he says, "I'll be there in an hour." And he was. And he came in and did an exam, and he was pretty sure I had pneumonia. And he said, "I want to put you in the hospital for a night. Would you prefer an ambulance, or do you think you can get over to the hospital in a taxi?" Well, I didn't really want an ambulance. I didn't want to make decisions. So I said, let's try a taxi. So he said, "I'll meet you at the hospital," and gave us the address and called the taxi for us. And I got dressed and put a few things together, and Carol helped me down into the lobby and out into the taxi, and off we were to the hospital. Now, the people in the hospital obviously were expecting us at this point. So when we walked in, they took me immediately into the lab and took a chest x ray and a blood draw. They were doing a blood draw. And you got to remember that in Latin American countries, people are so empathetic and they're so caring. So that while they were taking the blood out of my left arm, other nurse on the other side of me was stroking my right arm, saying, "Oh, senora, it'll be over in a minute. Don't worry, it's almost finished now. Everything's fine. You're fine." Anyway, she was lovely. After the blood draw, they took me up to a single room. They put an IV in and started hydrating me. The X-rays showed that I didn't have pneumonia, but I was severely dehydrated, which was why I was so weak and out of it. The hospital room was very nice, actually. I had my own bathroom, and the nurse even came in and made kind of a show of presenting me with toilet paper, which of course I appreciated. And I spent the whole day in the hospital and that night. But the day I was there, the doctor from the hotel came and saw me twice, checking on me. Other members of the staff, interns and residents, someone came in and asked me a bunch of questions or checked me over every hour or two. And I had a really good workout with my Spanish body vocabulary because while I knew the parts of the body and the organs of the body in Spanish, it's things that you don't use in regular conversation, liver and kidneys. These words don't get used very much. So I had to retrieve them from somewhere in my brain because it had been a long time since I'd learned them and had practically no usage of them at all. So that was good for me. That was a bit of a challenge. So the next morning they came in and I'm pretty rehydrated. I'm feeling much better at that point. And they said, okay, we're going to take out your IV as soon as you pay the hospital bill. And I said, okay. And Carol came in the room and she had gotten back to the hotel the night before and now was back to me at the hospital and she'd managed all that fine. And I said, Carol, here's my credit card. I said, I need you to find an ATM. Here's my password and go get money. Find out what the bill costs and go get me that money out of the ATM so I can pay the bill because they're not going to take out my IV or let me go until I can pay the bill. So she said, okay. And off she went. She was only gone about half an hour. She'd found the ATM. She'd gotten the money out. She'd checked at the hospital, at the place where you pay the bill in the hospital. She'd paid the bill and came up and got me. And as soon as she'd done that, they took out the IV and we were free to go. Carol felt very proud of herself for having done this. And her confidence level went way up and she realized that things can be managed. So if you ever are traveling alone or with someone else and they become incapacitated, it's amazing what you can do on your own. So for the whole cost of that situation, with the doctor visits, with the hospital, with the x-ray, with the blood draw, with the antibiotics with which they sent me home, everything, the cost was $158. I was really glad that this happened in Bolivia rather than at home. Thanks for watching.